The corner desk in the back of Harrison and Partners law firm belonged to Lynn Nguyen. Most days she sat quietly typing reports, answering phones, and organizing the chaos that four high-powered attorneys created in their wake. She was good at her job, efficient, thorough, and almost invisible. That's how most of the staff thought of her, the quiet woman who somehow kept everything running without ever raising her voice or calling attention to herself. Lynn had worked at the firm for 3 years now. She arrived each morning at 7:30, brewed the first pot of coffee, and reviewed the day's schedule before anyone else stepped through the glass doors. By the time Attorney Patel arrived at 8:15, followed by the others, Lynn had already handled the overnight emails and placed the most urgent files on each desk with color-coded notes. "I don't know what we'd do without you, Lynn," Attorney Patel would sometimes say as he grabbed his coffee mug. He meant it, but he knew almost nothing about her beyond her reliability. None of them did. On this particular Tuesday morning, Lynn was organizing the conference room for the weekly staff meeting when she overheard two of the younger associates talking in the hallway. "Did you see the email about the charity event?" asked Danielle, leaning against the wall with her phone in hand. "The cooking competition thing?" "Yeah, sounds like a waste of time to me," replied Raj, straightening his tie. "The managing partners are really pushing it, though. Each department has to enter someone. It's for some children's hospital fundraiser." "Well, count me out. I can barely make toast without burning it." Their voices dropped as they continued down the hall, but the conversation stuck with Lynn as she finished arranging the notepads and pens around the conference table. A cooking competition. The thought made her fingers tingle slightly, a sensation she hadn't felt in a long time. At exactly 9:00, the conference room filled with attorneys and paralegals. Lynn took her usual seat in the corner, notepad ready to record action items. Managing partner. Richard Harrison stood at the head of the table, his imposing figure commanding immediate silence. "Good morning, everyone. Before we get to case updates, I want to discuss the Metropolitan Children's Hospital Charity Cook-Off. As you know, our firm has been a major sponsor for 5 years running, and this year we're expected to participate more actively." A collective groan rippled through the room. I know, Harrison continued, holding up his hands. "But this is good publicity, and for an excellent cause. Each department needs to select one representative by the end of the day. The competition is in 3 weeks. The litigation team immediately began a heated debate about who should represent them. While the corporate law section pointed fingers at each other, Lynn watched silently, her pen moving across the page as she recorded the discussion. "What about the administrative department?" Harrison asked, looking toward the office manager, Gloria. Gloria shrugged. "None of us are particularly skilled in the kitchen, Richard. We're more the order takeout type." That's when Jordan, one of the third-year associates known for his practical jokes, pointed toward the corner. "What about Lynn? She's so organized, I bet she could follow a recipe better than any of us." The room fell silent as all eyes turned to Lynn. She felt her cheeks warm under their stares. It wasn't the first time she'd been the target of Jordan's jokes, though they were usually harmless enough. "That's actually not a bad idea," Gloria said, considering. "Lynn, would you be willing to represent the admin staff?" Lynn's heart beat a little faster. I suppose I could," she said softly, her accent slightly more pronounced than usual. "Perfect." Harrison clapped his hands together. "That's settled. Then, Lynn for admin, Danielle for litigation, Raj for corporate. Wait, I never agreed to." Raj started to protest, but Harrison continued assigning representatives until each department had a reluctant nominee. After the meeting, Lynn returned to her desk, her mind racing. As she sorted through the morning mail, Jordan stopped by, leaning on her desk with his usual smirk. "Sorry about volunteering you like that," he said, not sounding sorry at all. "But hey, how hard can it be? Just don't burn anything, and you'll do better than most of us would." Lynn gave him a small smile. "It's okay, I don't mind." "Great. Low expectations, right? Nobody expects the admin staff to win anyway." He winked and walked away, already forgetting about her as he answered his ringing phone. What Jordan didn't know, what none of them knew, was that for Lynn, cooking wasn't just following a recipe. It was in her blood, woven through her earliest memories like the steam that had risen from her grandmother's pots in their small kitchen back home. That evening, after everyone had left, Lynn stayed late as she often did, finishing reports and preparing for the next day. But tonight, she found herself opening her personal email and clicking on a folder labeled recipes. Inside were hundreds of carefully categorized dishes, some typed, others scanned handwritten pages in her grandmother's flowing script. Her phone buzzed with a text from her roommate Priya. "Heard you got roped into some cooking thing at work. Want me to help you practice? I'm pretty good with boxed mac and cheese." Lynn smiled to herself as she typed her reply. "Thanks, but I'll be fine." On her bus ride home, Lynn gazed out the window at the city lights, her mind already planning what she would prepare. The firm thought they had chosen her as a joke, the quiet woman who wouldn't make a fuss. They had no idea that back in her hometown, cooking had been her first language, her truest form of expression. The small apartment Lynn shared with Priya was modest, but well kept. When she walked in, Priya was sprawled on the couch watching a reality cooking show. The irony not lost on Lynn. "So they picked on you again, huh?" Priya asked, muting the TV. "That Jordan guy is such a jerk." Lynn set down her bag and hung up her coat. "It's not like that. They just needed someone. And they chose the quiet one who never complains." Priya rolled her eyes. Classic workplace move. "It's fine, really." Lynn headed to the kitchen, opening the refrigerator to assess what they had. Not much, some eggs, half a bell pepper turning soft at the edges, leftover rice, a few wilting green onions. To most people, it looked like a sad collection of ingredients that should probably be thrown out. To Lynn, it was the beginning of something beautiful. "Want to order pizza?" Priya called from the living room. "No, I'll make something," Lynn replied, already washing her hands. Priya wandered into the kitchen doorway, curious. "From that?" she asked, pointing at the meager ingredients Lynn had set on the counter. "Watch and learn," Lynn said with a small smile, reaching for a knife. Her hands moved with a confidence that surprised Priya. The knife became an extension of her fingers as she diced the pepper and green onions with precise, quick movements. She heated a pan, added a splash of oil, and within minutes the small kitchen filled with enticing aromas that drew Priya closer. "Where did you learn to cook like that?" Priya asked, watching as Lynn cracked eggs directly into the rice mixture with one hand, a technique she'd only seen on cooking shows. Lynn shrugged. "My grandmother taught me. In our village, cooking wasn't a hobby. It was how we showed love, how we preserved our history." In 15 minutes, Lynn presented 2 bowls of fried rice, garnished with the last bits of green onion and a drizzle of the chili oil she kept in a special jar at the back of the pantry. It looked nothing like the sad ingredients it had come from. Priya took a bite and her eyes widened. "This is incredible. Why have you been letting me cook all this time? Or ordering takeout?" Lynn joined her at their small table. "I don't always have the energy after work, and sometimes—" She paused, searching for the right words. "Sometimes it makes me miss home too much." They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes before Priya spoke again. "You know, you could actually win this competition thing." Lynn twirled her fork in the rice. "Maybe, but they're not expecting much. Jordan thinks it's funny that they picked me. So show them." Priya's eyes lit up with mischief. "Blow their minds. I want to see the look on Jordan's face when he realizes the quiet admin he's been underestimating can cook circles around everyone else." The idea took root in Lynn's mind, growing stronger as she washed the dishes. It had been years since she'd cooked competitively, not since those summers when her grandmother had entered her in the village festivals. Back then, cooking had been pure joy, a way to make people happy, to see their faces transform with the first bite. When had she stopped? Somewhere between moving to America, working 3 jobs to put herself through school, and finally landing this stable position at the firm. Somewhere along the way, cooking had become utilitarian, quick meals to keep her going, nothing more. That night, Lynn pulled a worn notebook from the bottom of her dresser drawer. Its pages were filled with recipes and notes in her native language, some dating back to her childhood. She ran her fingers over her grandmother's handwriting, feeling the indentations in the paper where the pen had pressed firmly, recording generations of knowledge. For the first time in years, Lynn began to plan a menu that would showcase not just skill, but heart. The firm might have chosen her as a joke, but as she sketched out ideas and made a shopping list, she felt a spark rekindling inside her, the joy of creating something extraordinary from the simplest ingredients. They had no idea what was coming, and truth be told, neither did Lynn. But as she finally drifted off to sleep, her dreams were filled with the sounds and scents of her grandmother's kitchen, and the feeling that perhaps, just perhaps, this joke might turn into something unexpected for everyone involved. The next morning, Lynn arrived at the office even earlier than usual. She brewed the coffee, sorted the mail, and then slipped into the break room to examine the kitchen space. It wasn't much, a microwave, a small refrigerator, and a coffee maker, but she wasn't concerned about that. The competition would provide cooking stations. What she needed to focus on was her menu. As she stood there mentally cataloging possibilities, Gloria walked in, surprised to find Lynn staring thoughtfully at the empty counter. "Everything okay?" Gloria asked, reaching for a coffee mug. Lynn nodded quickly. "Yes, fine, just thinking about the cooking competition." Gloria patted her shoulder. "Don't stress about it too much. Nobody expects our department to win. Just make something simple that won't catch fire, and we'll count it as a victory." She laughed, not unkindly, and Lynn smiled back politely. "I'll do my best," she replied, and returned to her desk where a stack of contracts awaited her attention. Throughout the day, various colleagues stopped by to offer well-intentioned but condescending advice. "My mom always says if you can read, you can cook," offered the paralegal who regularly burned microwave popcorn. "Just find a foolproof recipe online," suggested one of the attorneys who ate takeout 5 nights a week. Jordan was the worst, sending her links to Cooking for Absolute Beginners and How Not to Poison Your Judges. Each time, Lynn thanked them with the same quiet smile that had become her workplace signature. Let them think what they wanted. She had other plans. That evening, Lynn didn't go straight home. Instead, she visited the farmers market across town, where the vendors were beginning to pack up for the day. She moved from stall to stall, her fingers lightly touching vegetables, lifting them to check their weight, occasionally bringing them to her nose to smell. "You know your way around produce," commented an older woman selling mushrooms. "Most people just grab and go," Lynn smiled. "My grandmother taught me that vegetables speak to you if you listen carefully enough." The woman nodded approvingly and slipped an extra handful of rare wild mushrooms into Lynn's bag. "For someone who listens," she said with a wink. By the time Lynn arrived home laden with bags of carefully selected ingredients, Priya was already there, attempting to help by clearing space in their small kitchen. "I invited a few friends over," Priya announced. "I hope that's okay. I thought you might want some practice serving food to actual humans before the big competition." Lynn hesitated. She wasn't used to cooking for audiences anymore, but perhaps Priya was right. She needed to shake off the rust. "Sure," she agreed, unpacking her treasures. "How many?" "Just 4, Priya said, then bit her lip. "Well, maybe 6. Diego said he might bring his roommate and Kelly's bringing her new boyfriend." Lynn took a deep breath. 6 strangers. 6 judgments. But then again, the competition would have actual judges, people who knew food. This would be good practice. "I'll need to adjust my plan," she murmured, more to herself than to Priya. She reached for her grandmother's notebook and began to make calculations, converting family-sized recipes to feed a larger group. 2 hours. Later, their apartment had transformed. The small dining table was extended with a folding table borrowed from a neighbor. Mismatched plates were arranged with care, each holding what appeared to be an artistic arrangement of colors and textures. The air was rich with unfamiliar but enticing aromas. As Priya's friends arrived, they looked around in confusion, clearly expecting pizza boxes or takeout containers. Instead, they found Lynn putting final touches on what looked like restaurant-quality dishes. "When you said your roommate was cooking, I thought you meant like spaghetti," whispered Kelly, loud enough for everyone to hear. Lynn pretended not to notice as she placed a platter in the center of the table. On it were delicate dumplings, their skins translucent enough to reveal the filling inside, each one pleated with perfect precision. "These are my grandmother's crystal dumplings," she explained softly. "The wrappers are made from wheat starch and tapioca, which makes them transparent. The filling is shrimp with a little bit of bamboo shoot and water chestnut for crunch." She demonstrated how to dip them in the small dishes of black vinegar and chili oil she had placed around the table. The guests watched, then followed her example. The room fell silent as they tasted. Diego was the first to speak. "Holy," he caught himself glancing at Lynn. "Sorry, but these are incredible. Like, better than any restaurant dumplings I've ever had." The others nodded in agreement, already reaching for seconds. Encouraged, Lynn brought out the next dish. Tender pieces of braised pork belly that melted in the mouth, served with pickled mustard greens that cut through the richness with their tangy crunch. "The secret is in the balance," Lynn explained as the guests made appreciative noises. "Too rich and it becomes overwhelming. Too tangy and it loses comfort. My grandmother used to say that cooking is like life, always seeking the right balance." The meal progressed through 4 more courses, each more impressive than the last. Priya's friends peppered Lynn with questions. Where had she learned to cook like this? Why wasn't she working in a restaurant? Had she considered competing professionally? With each question, Lynn felt a door inside her opening wider, releasing memories she had carefully packed away. She told them about summer mornings in her grandmother's kitchen, learning to make dough before she could properly hold a pencil. About the village cooking competitions where, at 12 years old, she had beaten women 4 times her age. About her grandmother's dream that Lynn would someday cook for important people in grand places. "So what happened?" asked Kelly's boyfriend, who had barely spoken until now, too busy enjoying the food. "Why are you working as an admin instead of running your own restaurant?" The question hung in the air. Priya looked concerned, but Lynn smiled softly. "Life happened," she said simply. "My grandmother got sick. I came to America to make money for her treatments. By the time she passed away, I had built a different life here. Cooking became private. Something I did just for myself, to remember her." The table fell quiet. Then Diego raised his glass. "To your grandmother," he said, "who taught you to make food that makes strangers feel like family." Everyone raised their glasses and something warm unfurled in Lynn's chest. Pride, yes, but also a sense of rightness, as if pieces of herself that had drifted apart were finding their way back together. After the guests left, full of food and carrying containers of leftovers that Lynn had insisted they take, Priya helped clean up. "I've never seen you like that before," Priya said, wrapping leftover dumplings. "Like what?" "Confident. Glowing. When you talked about the food, about your grandmother, it was like seeing a whole different person." Lynn considered this as she washed a serving platter. "I haven't cooked like that in a long time. I forgot how it feels." "Your colleagues are going to lose their minds," Priya said, grinning. "Jordan especially. I wish I could be there to see his face." The competition was still 2 weeks away. Lynn knew she needed to plan carefully, to practice the dishes she would present. The next day was Saturday, and she made a list of everything she would need. The weekend passed in a blur of shopping, chopping, tasting, and adjusting. Lynn created 3 possible menus, testing each dish multiple times until she was satisfied. Priya dutifully tasted everything, offering feedback that grew less useful as she became increasingly impressed with everything Lynn made. "It's all amazing," Priya said Sunday night, flopping onto the couch. "I can't eat another bite. You're going to destroy the competition." Lynn laughed, but inside, a small worry nagged at her. What if she was rusty? What if her skills, impressive to Priya and her friends, weren't up to professional standards? It had been years since she had cooked to impress anyone who really knew food. Monday morning arrived with a light rain that matched Lynn's contemplative mood. At the office, she went about her usual tasks, but her mind was elsewhere, mentally, reviewing recipes and techniques. Jordan stopped by her desk just before lunch. "How's the cooking practice going?" he asked, his tone making it clear he expected disaster. "Fine," Lynn replied with her usual smile. "Well, don't worry too much, it's just for fun, right? Nobody expects you to be a pro." As he walked away, Lynn opened her bottom drawer and pulled out the charity event brochure she'd been studying. The judges' names were listed at the bottom. 2 local restaurant owners, a food critic, and a celebrity chef who had recently opened a high-end restaurant downtown. These were serious food people, the kind her grandmother had always said would recognize true talent, the kind who might open doors if they were impressed. For the first time, Lynn allowed herself to consider a possibility she had tucked away years ago, that cooking could be more than a private comfort, that it could be her future, not just her past. That evening, she called the only person she knew who might understand. Auntie Mai wasn't really her aunt, but she had been her grandmother's closest friend, and she now ran a successful restaurant in Chinatown. "Auntie," Lynn said when the older woman answered, "I need your advice, and maybe your help." An hour later, Lynn had a plan, not just for the competition but for what might come after. It was time to stop hiding her light. Her grandmother would have wanted that. As she closed her recipe notebook that night, her fingers lingered on the faded cover. "Watch me, grandmother," she whispered. "I'm ready now." The morning of the competition arrived with golden autumn sunshine streaming through Lynn's bedroom window. She had barely slept, going over her planned dishes again and again in her mind. Now as she got dressed in the outfit she had carefully selected, black pants, a crisp white button-down shirt, and comfortable shoes, she felt strangely calm. Priya was already in the kitchen, making coffee and toast. "The big day," she said, handing Lynn a mug. "Are you nervous?" Lynn considered the question as she sipped her coffee. "Not nervous exactly, more ready." "Your colleagues are going to be shocked," Priya said, grinning. "I wish I could be there to see their faces." "Actually," Lynn said, reaching into her bag, "I have something for you." She pulled out a small envelope and handed it to Priya. Inside was a ticket to the charity event. Priya's eyes widened. "You got me a ticket? These were sold out weeks ago." Lynn smiled. "Auntie Mai knows one of the organizers. She helped me get it." Priya threw her arms around Lynn. "I'm going to be your biggest cheerleader. I might even make a sign." "Please don't," Lynn laughed, but she was touched by her roommate's enthusiasm. The competition was being held at the city's convention center, a 30-minute bus ride from their apartment. Lynn carried a small bag containing her personal knives, the ones her grandmother had gifted her when she turned 16, their handles worn smooth from years of use. Everything else would be provided at the venue. When she arrived, the space was already buzzing with activity. Tables were arranged in a large circle, each equipped with a cooking station. Volunteers in bright t-shirts directed competitors to their assigned spots, while caterers set up refreshment tables for the spectators who would arrive later. Lynn found her station, marked with a small sign that read, "Harrison and Partners Law Firm, Administrative Department." She set down her bag and took in her surroundings. The cooking area was well equipped, a 2-burner induction stove, a small oven, and a generous prep space. She ran her hand along the counter, feeling its cool, smooth surface, and took a deep breath. "Looks like we're neighbors," said a friendly voice. Lynn turned to see a middle-aged man setting up at the next station. His sign read City Hospital Pediatrics Department. "I'm Dr. Chen," he said, extending his hand. "But today, just call me David. No titles in the kitchen, right?" "Lynn," she replied, shaking his hand. "Nice to meet you." "Have you done this before?" he asked, unpacking his own set of knives. "The competition? No. Cooking? Yes, but not for a while." David nodded. "Same here. I used to cook all the time before residency and kids took over my life. This is my first time cooking for anyone besides family in years." There was something comforting about meeting someone else who was returning to a passion after a long break. They chatted easily as they organized their stations, and Lynn felt some of her tension melt away. The friendly moment was interrupted by the arrival of Jordan and a few other colleagues from the law firm. They had come early, apparently to offer moral support, though their expectations were clearly low. Wow, they give you all this fancy equipment, Jordan said, looking around Lynn's station. Hope it's not too overwhelming. I'll manage, Lynn said mildly. We brought you something, said Danielle, the litigation department's representative, who would be competing at her own station across the circle. She handed Lynn a small gift bag. Inside was an apron with Harrison and Partners Legal, Eagle, printed on it along with a kitchen timer shaped like a gavel. The gifts were well-intentioned if slightly patronizing. Thank you, Lynn said, slipping the apron over her head. It was actually quite practical. Gloria arrived next, giving Lynn an encouraging pat on the shoulder. Remember, no pressure. Just have fun with it. We're all just happy you volunteered. I was volunteered, Lynn corrected with a small smile. Well, yes, Gloria said, looking slightly embarrassed. But you've been such a good sport about it. More colleagues arrived, and soon a small crowd of law firm employees had gathered around Lynn's station, offering advice and making jokes about fire extinguishers. Lynn nodded politely, but her attention was increasingly drawn to the activity around her as other competitors began to unpack ingredients and organize their workspaces with practiced efficiency. Some, like David, seemed to be enthusiastic amateurs. Others moved with the confidence of people who knew their way around professional kitchens. Watching them, Lynn felt a flutter of uncertainty. Had she overestimated her abilities? It had been years since she'd cooked competitively. A voice on the loudspeaker interrupted her thoughts. Competitors, please gather at the center stage for orientation. Lynn and the other cooks made their way to the stage, where a woman with a clipboard introduced herself as the event coordinator. She explained the rules. 3 hours to prepare 3 dishes, an appetizer, a main course, and a dessert. They would be judged on taste, presentation, technique, and creativity. Pantry ingredients were available to all, but signature ingredients had to be brought by the competitors. And remember, the coordinator concluded, this is for charity, so have fun. The judges will begin tasting at 2 p.m. sharp. As they returned to their stations, the spectator area began to fill with people. Lynn spotted Priya entering with Diego and a few other friends from the dinner party. They waved enthusiastically, and Priya pointed to her t-shirt, which she had customized with the words Team Lynn in glitter paint. Despite her earlier request, Lynn couldn't help but smile at her roommate's support. Another familiar face appeared in the crowd. Auntie Mai, elegant in a traditional ao dai, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. She caught Lynn's eye and gave a small nod that conveyed both blessing and expectation. Seeing her grandmother's old friend watching made Lynn stand a little straighter. She would not disappoint. At precisely 11 a.m., a horn sounded, signaling the start of the competition. The convention center erupted with activity as 50 competitors began their culinary battle. Lynn took a moment to center herself, closing her eyes briefly and imagining her grandmother standing beside her. Then she opened her bag and removed her knives, unwrapping them from their cloth covering with reverence. The familiar weight of her chef's knife in her hand felt like greeting an old friend. She began by preparing her ingredients, her hands moving, with a rhythm that came back to her as naturally as breathing. The noise of the crowd faded away as she focused entirely on the task before her. From the spectator area, Priya watched in amazement. This was not the quiet roommate who usually moved through their apartment with such reserve. This was someone else entirely, confident, focused, and in complete command of her environment. Lynn's colleagues noticed the transformation too. Jordan, who had been making jokes about microwave cooking just minutes earlier, fell silent as he watched Lynn's knife flash through vegetables with speed and precision that spoke of years of practice. "Did you know she could cook like that?" Gloria whispered to him. Jordan shook his head, his expression a mixture of surprise and dawning respect. "I had no idea." What impressed them even more was Lynn's calm efficiency. While some competitors raced frantically between tasks, dropping things and cursing under their breath, Lynn moved with an almost meditative focus. Each action flowed into the next, nothing wasted, nothing rushed. By the halfway point, delicious aromas rose from Lynn's station. She was preparing a menu that honored her heritage while incorporating local seasonal ingredients, a fusion that felt natural rather than forced. For her appetizer, she made delicate rice paper rolls filled with herbs and vegetables from the farmer's market, served with a dipping sauce whose recipe had been passed down through generations of her family. The main course was a modern interpretation of her grandmother's braised pork, slow-cooked to perfection and paired with rice and pickled vegetables. For dessert, she prepared a light, refreshing coconut panna cotta infused with lemongrass and topped with fresh mango. As she worked, Lynn was aware of growing attention. Other competitors glanced over at her station. Spectators pointed and whispered. Even the judges, who were walking around observing techniques, lingered longer at her station than at others. One judge in particular, a distinguished-looking, older man with salt and pepper hair, watched her hands as she pleated a dumpling with practiced ease. "Beautiful technique," he commented. "Classical training?" "Family training," Lynn replied with a small smile, not breaking her rhythm. The judge nodded approvingly and moved on, but Lynn noticed him glance back several times. From the crowd, Auntie Mai caught her eye again and mouthed what looked like taller. Lynn understood immediately. Her plating needed more height, more drama. She adjusted her plan accordingly, mentally thanking the older woman for her experienced eye. As the final hour approached, the energy in the convention center intensified. Some competitors showed signs of stress, rushing to complete their dishes or frantically redoing elements that had gone wrong. Lynn remained steady, each movement purposeful, each decision sure. When the final countdown began, 10 minutes left, she was already plating her dessert, adding a delicate caramel decoration that spiraled upward like a work of art. Around her, some competitors scrambled to finish, while others stood back, their work complete, but their faces anxious. "Time's up. Hands off your dishes," the announcer called as the horn sounded again. Lynn stepped back from her station, suddenly aware of how tired she was. 3 hours had passed in what felt like both an instant and an eternity. As she looked at her completed dishes, arranged beautifully, on the plates she had chosen, a wave of emotion washed over her. Pride, yes, but also a bittersweet joy. Her grandmother should have been here to see this. In a way, Lynn felt she was. From across the room, Priya gave her a thumbs up and mouthed, "You killed it." Next to her, Diego was recording everything, on his phone. Beyond them, Lynn could see her colleagues from the law firm, their expressions ranging from shock to admiration. Jordan's mouth was literally hanging open, but it was Auntie Mai's face that Lynn sought in the crowd. The older woman was smiling, her eyes bright with unshed tears. She pressed her hand to her heart and nodded once, a gesture that said everything words could not. The judges began their rounds, tasting each competitor's offerings. When they reached Lynn's station, she presented her dishes with quiet confidence, explaining her inspirations and techniques. As the distinguished judge tasted her main course, his eyebrows rose in evident surprise and pleasure. "This is," he began, then paused, taking another bite. "Extraordinary. The balance of flavors, the texture. It reminds me of a restaurant I visited years ago in a small village outside Hanoi. The chef there was an older woman who cooked with this same soulfulness." Lynn's heart skipped a beat. Could he possibly have visited her grandmother's village? Before she could ask, the judges moved on to the next station, but the older judge glanced back at her with newfound interest in his eyes. As the judges deliberated, Lynn's colleagues surrounded her, their earlier condescension replaced by genuine amazement. "That was incredible," Gloria said, her voice tinged with awe. "Why didn't you tell us you could cook like that?" "Nobody asked," Lynn replied simply. The judges disappeared into a private room to deliberate, leaving the competitors and spectators to mingle in nervous anticipation. Lynn found herself surrounded by her colleagues, who bombarded her with questions she had never been asked in 3 years of working together. "Where did you learn to cook like that? Have you ever worked in a restaurant? Why didn't you ever bring food to the office potlucks?" Lynn answered patiently, sharing small pieces of her story that she had kept to herself for so long. As she spoke, She realized how much she had hidden away, not just her cooking skills but her whole self. The quiet efficiency that made her valuable as an administrative assistant had become a shell she rarely stepped out of. Jordan hung at the edge of the group, uncharacteristically quiet. When the others drifted away to check out the other competitors' stations, he approached Lynn with an awkward smile. "I owe you an apology," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "I kind of nominated you as a joke and, well, you're clearly the real deal." "I feel like an idiot." Lynn could have made him squirm, but that wasn't her way. "No apology needed," she said. "Without your joke, I might never have found my way back to this." "Back to?" Jordan looked confused. "Cooking used to be my whole life," Lynn explained. "But I set it aside when I came to America. Today was the first time in years I've cooked like that with my whole heart." Jordan looked at her with new respect. "Well, you were amazing. I've eaten at 5-star restaurants that couldn't touch what you made today." Before Lynn could respond, Priya rushed over, practically bouncing with excitement. "You were incredible. Everyone's talking about you. There's even a food blogger who wants to interview you." She pointed to a young woman with purple-streaked hair who was indeed hovering nearby, notebook in hand. Lynn felt a flutter of panic. She wasn't used to attention, had always preferred to blend into the background. Sensing her discomfort, David, her station neighbor, appeared at her side. "The vultures are circling," he said with a good-natured laugh. "Want to escape for a bit? I could use some fresh air before they announce the winners." Grateful for the lifeline, Lynn nodded. They slipped away to a small courtyard outside the convention center, where the autumn air was crisp and refreshing after the heat and tension of the competition. "So, family training," David said as they sat on a bench beneath a maple tree shedding orange leaves. "That was modest. You cook like someone who's been doing it professionally for decades." Lynn smiled. "My grandmother was the real talent. She ran a small restaurant in our village that people would travel hours to visit. I just helped her from the time I could reach the counter standing on a stool." "And yet you work at a law firm," David observed. "Life takes strange turns, doesn't it?" Lynn nodded, looking up at the patches of blue sky visible through the maple branches. "What about you? You're a doctor who cooks like a chef." David laughed. "My parents owned a Chinese restaurant in Chicago. I worked there every day after school. They wanted something better for me, pushed me toward medicine. I love being a doctor, but sometimes I wonder if you chose the right path." Lynn finished for him. "Exactly." He looked at her curiously. "Do you ever wonder that too?" Before Lynn could answer, they heard the announcement calling everyone back inside for the results. They returned to find the convention center buzzing with anticipation. The judges took their places on the stage, along with the event organizer and the director of the children's hospital. After a brief speech about the money raised and its importance to the hospital, they moved on to announcing the winners. Third place went to a firefighter whose barbecue ribs had drawn crowds of admirers. Second place was awarded to a kindergarten teacher who had created an elaborate dessert that looked like a children's storybook. And first place, the head judge announced, building tension with a dramatic pause, goes to Lynn Nguyen from Harrison & Partners law firm. For a moment, Lynn couldn't move. She felt Priya pushing her forward, heard the cheers of her colleagues, but it all seemed distant, dreamlike. As she made her way to the stage, she caught sight of Auntie Mai, who was wiping tears from her eyes while beaming with pride. The head judge, the distinguished man who had commented on her technique earlier, handed her a trophy and a check for the charity. As he did, he leaned in slightly. "Miss Nguyen, I wonder if you might stay after the ceremony. I'd like to speak with you privately." Dazed, Lynn nodded and returned to her colleagues, who were celebrating as if they'd won the lottery. Managing partner Harrison, who hadn't even known her name correctly a month ago, put his arm around her shoulders for photos, beaming with reflected glory. "Harrison & Partners has always supported diverse talents," he told a reporter, while Lynn tried not to roll her eyes. After the excitement died down and people began to disperse, Lynn found herself approached by the head judge, who introduced himself properly. "I'm Thomas Wong," he said, extending his hand. Executive chef at Azure Downtown, and before you ask, yes, I visited your grandmother's restaurant 15 years ago during a culinary tour of Vietnam. I never forgot that meal. Lynn's eyes widened. You knew my grandmother? I didn't know her personally, but her cooking left an indelible impression. And today, tasting your food, I had the same experience. That rare feeling of tasting something made with true understanding and heart. He paused. Do you work in the culinary field currently? No, Lynn said, suddenly self-conscious. I'm an administrative assistant. Thomas looked genuinely surprised. That's quite a waste of extraordinary talent, if you don't mind my saying. So, have you considered professional cooking? It's been a dream, Lynn admitted. But dreams and reality don't always align. Perhaps they can, Thomas said. He handed her a business card. I'm opening a new restaurant next month focused on modern interpretations of traditional Southeast Asian cuisine. I'd like you to come in for a proper tryout. No promises, but based on what I tasted today, I think you have what it takes to be part of our kitchen team. Lynn stared at the card in her hand, her heart racing. A real opportunity, handed to her by someone who had actually tasted her grandmother's cooking. It felt like fate. Like her grandmother's hand reaching across time, to guide her. Thank you, she said, her voice steady despite her inner turmoil. I'll think about it. Thomas nodded. Please do. Talent like yours shouldn't be filing papers. As he walked away, Lynn felt a presence at her side. Auntie Mai had approached quietly, her wise eyes taking in everything. Your grandmother is dancing in heaven today, the older woman said in their native language. She always said you would cook for important people someday. Chef Wong offered me a job, Lynn said, still not quite believing it. Well, a tryout for a job. Auntie Mai nodded, unsurprised. Of course he did. He recognized what I have always known. You have the gift. She took Lynn's hands in her own. Your grandmother wanted this for you, but more importantly, do you want it for yourself? That was the question Lynn had been asking herself ever since she'd felt the familiar weight of her knife in her hand again. Felt the joy of creating something beautiful and delicious. Did she want to leave the safety of her predictable job for the heat and pressure and potential heartbreak of professional cooking? Before she could answer, her phone buzzed with a text from Priya. We're all going out to celebrate. Meet us at Golden Tiger in 30. The firm is paying. Lynn smiled, showing the message to Auntie Mai. Apparently I have a celebration to attend. Go, the older woman said with a warm smile. Enjoy your moment. The future will wait until tomorrow. When Lynn arrived at Golden Tiger, an upscale Chinese restaurant, she was surprised to find not just her law firm colleagues but also Priya and her friends, David from the competition, and even some of the other competitors. Word had spread quickly about the quiet admin assistant with world-class cooking skills. The restaurant's owner, who knew Auntie Mai, had reserved a private room for them and prepared a special banquet. As dishes arrived at the table, Lynn found herself analyzing flavors and techniques, thinking about how she might prepare each dish differently. Gloria noticed her thoughtful expression. You're critiquing the food, aren't you? She asked with newfound respect. Lynn smiled, slightly embarrassed. Force of habit. Don't apologize, Jordan said, raising his glass. We're in the presence of a master. I propose a toast to Lynn, who taught us all a valuable lesson about not judging books by their covers. Everyone raised their glasses, and Lynn felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the excellent wine. For the first time since arriving in America, she felt fully seen, her whole self acknowledged and valued. As the evening progressed, conversation flowed freely. Lynn found herself sharing stories about her grandmother and their small restaurant, about cooking competitions she had won as a teenager, about dishes she had created and techniques she had mastered. So what now? Priya asked during a quiet moment. Are you going to keep working at the firm? The question hung in the air. Lynn's colleagues leaned in, clearly invested in her answer. Even managing partner Harrison looked concerned, suddenly faced with the possibility of losing his extraordinarily efficient assistant. Chef Wong offered me a tryout at his new restaurant. Lynn said, watching their faces carefully. Azure? Jordan exclaimed. That place has a 6-month waiting list. Harrison cleared his throat. While we would, of course, support whatever decision you make, Lynn, I hope you know how valued you are at Harrison and Partners. Perhaps we could discuss some adjustments to your position and compensation. Lynn suppressed a smile. After 3 years of being practically invisible, suddenly she was indispensable. Thank you, she said. I haven't made any decisions yet. This has all happened very quickly. Whatever you decide, Gloria said warmly. You've changed how I'll look at quiet people forever. Who knows what talents are hiding in plain sight all around us. As the evening wound down, Lynn found herself on the restaurant's balcony looking out at the city lights. David joined her, leaning on the railing beside her. Quite a day, he said. Lynn nodded. Life-changing, maybe. Scary, terrifying, she admitted. Stepping off a safe path onto an uncertain one always is. David considered this. My parents wanted me to be a doctor because it was safe, respected. But the happiest I ever saw my father was in his restaurant kitchen. Even though he worked twice as hard for half the money, Lynn thought about her grandmother, who had worked from dawn until midnight in her tiny restaurant, whose hands had been calloused and scarred from decades of knives and hot pans. Yet she had never seen her grandmother happier than when customers closed their eyes in pleasure at the first taste of her food. What would you do? Lynn asked. If you could choose again? David smiled. I'd be a doctor who cooks amazing meals on his days off. I'd find a way to honor both parts of myself. He looked at her thoughtfully. Maybe the question isn't which path to take, but how to walk multiple paths at once. As Lynn returned home, that night, her trophy sitting somewhat absurdly on their small kitchen counter, Priya watched her moving around the apartment, lost in thought. You're going to take the restaurant job, aren't you? Priya asked. Lynn looked at her roommate, at the Team Lynn t-shirt she was still wearing, now stained with celebration wine. I don't know yet, but for the first time in a long time I feel like I have choices, real choices. Whatever you decide, I'm still on Team Lynn, Priya said, giving her a hug. That night, as Lynn drifted off to sleep, she dreamed of her grandmother's kitchen, of the smell of ginger and lemongrass, of hands guiding hers as she learned to fold dumplings. But in the dream, the kitchen transformed, growing larger, more modern, filling with people in chef's whites who looked to her for guidance. She woke with the first light of dawn, her decision made. The morning after her triumph, Lynn woke early, made coffee, and sat by the window of her small apartment, watching the city come to life. The business card Chef Wong had given her lay on the table before her, its elegant embossing catching the morning light. She had already memorized the information it contained, had turned the opportunity over and over in her mind throughout the night. When Priya emerged from her bedroom, yawning and bleary-eyed, she found Lynn dressed for work in her usual neat attire. You're going to the office today? Priya asked, surprised. I thought you'd take a victory day. Lynn smiled. I have something important to do there. During her bus ride, Lynn's phone buzzed constantly with notifications. The video Diego had taken of her cooking had been shared widely, and local food. Bloggers were tagging her in posts speculating about the administrative assistant with chef-level skills. Her moment of recognition had extended beyond the competition's walls, growing into something she hadn't anticipated. When she arrived at Harrison and Partners, she was greeted with applause. The reception desk was decorated with balloons, and someone had put up a hastily printed banner that read, "Congratulations to our kitchen champion." Colleagues who had barely noticed her before now stopped to shake her hand or pat her shoulder as she made her way to her desk. Gloria had placed the competition trophy prominently on a shelf near the reception area, with a small placard identifying Lynn as the winner. "Hope you don't mind," she said. "We're all just so proud. It's the first time our firm has won anything that wasn't, well, legal." "It's fine," Lynn said, though the attention felt strange after years of comfortable invisibility. She settled at her desk and began her usual morning routine, but her mind was elsewhere. At precisely 9:30, She picked up her phone and called the number on Chef Wong's card. "This is Lin Nguyen," she said when he answered. "From the competition yesterday. I'd like to accept your offer of a tryout." "Excellent," Chef Wong replied, his tone warm but professional. "Can you come in this weekend, Saturday at 2 p.m., before our dinner service begins?" "I'll be there," Lin said, her heart racing with a mixture of excitement and terror. After hanging up, she took a deep breath and composed an email to managing partner Harrison, requesting a meeting later that day. Then she continued with her work, fielding curious questions from colleagues who dropped by her desk with flimsy excuses to chat with the woman they'd overlooked for years. At 3 p.m., Harrison welcomed her into his corner office with unprecedented warmth. "Lin, come in. Can I get you coffee, water? We have some pastries from that French place down the street." "I'm fine, thank you," Lin said, taking a seat across from his imposing desk. "Well, I want to say again how impressed we all are. You certainly put Harrison and Partners on the map in a new way." He chuckled. "My wife's friends are actually envious that I work with you. They all saw the video." Lin nodded, unsurprised that the footage had made the rounds in social circles as well. "Thank you for meeting with me, Mr. Harrison. I wanted to discuss my position here." Harrison's expression shifted to one of concern. "Yes, of course. As I mentioned last night, we highly value your contributions. I've been thinking that perhaps your title doesn't reflect your importance to the firm. Executive Administrative Coordinator might be more appropriate, with a corresponding salary adjustment, of course." Lin had prepared for this, had rehearsed, her words carefully. "I appreciate that, but I've made a decision. I'll be leaving Harrison and Partners in 2 weeks." Harrison's face fell. "Leaving? But why?" "If it's about compensation, I assure you we can be competitive with any offer you've received." "It's not about money," Lin explained. "Chef Wong has offered me an opportunity to pursue cooking professionally, and I've decided to accept it." "I see." Harrison leaned back in his chair, processing this unexpected turn. "Well, I can't say I'm not disappointed. You're the most efficient assistant we've ever had. But I understand wanting to follow your passion." He smiled ruefully. "I wanted to be a jazz musician before law school. Life takes us on strange journeys." "Yes, it does," Lin agreed. "But sometimes we get a chance to redirect our path. Will you at least help us find and train your replacement?" Harrison asked. "And perhaps cater our holiday party?" he added. With a hopeful smile, Lin laughed. "I'd be happy to help with the transition. As for the holiday party, we'll see what my new schedule allows." Word of Lin's resignation spread quickly through the office. Some colleagues expressed genuine sadness to see her go, while others seemed most concerned about who would now handle the tasks they'd come to rely on her for. Jordan, surprisingly, was among the most supportive. "You'd be crazy not to take this chance," he told her over lunch in the break room. "Besides, I heard Azure pays their sous chefs better than we pay our junior associates and with better hours." "I'm not going in as a sous chef," Lin clarified. "I'll be starting at the bottom like everyone else." Jordan shook his head. "Not for long, you won't. I saw what you can do." The weekend arrived quickly. On Saturday afternoon, Priya helped Lin select her outfit for the tryout. Clean black pants, a crisp white shirt, and comfortable shoes, similar to what she'd worn for the competition, but of slightly better quality, purchased specially for this occasion. "You look like a real chef," Priya said, adjusting Lin's collar. "Are you nervous?" "Terrified," Lin admitted. "What if I'm not good enough? What if the competition was just a fluke?" "It wasn't," Priya said firmly. "You've been cooking since you were a child. This is what you were meant to do." Azure was located in the heart of downtown, its elegant blue-tinted windows and minimalist signage suggesting the refined experience within. When Lin arrived, the restaurant was closed to the public, the staff busy with pre-service preparations. A host directed her to the kitchen where Chef Wong was waiting. The kitchen was a gleaming temple of stainless steel and state-of-the-art equipment, far more sophisticated than anything Lin had worked with before. Several chefs in white coats moved about with practiced efficiency, some eyeing her curiously as she entered. Chef Wang greeted her with a professional nod. "Lin, welcome. Are you ready to show us what you can do?" He explained the tryout. She would prepare 3 dishes of her choice using the ingredients available in their walk-in refrigerator and pantry. She would have 2 hours working alongside the regular staff as they prepared for dinner service. The challenge was intimidating but clear. Lin tied on the apron Chef Wang provided, pulled her hair back into a neat bun, and followed him to the walk-in. Inside, she found an abundance of top-quality ingredients: pristine vegetables, fresh seafood, premium meats, and exotic imports that would have been impossible to find in regular markets. For a moment she felt overwhelmed by the choices, by the pressure to impress. Then she closed her eyes briefly and imagined her grandmother beside her, offering guidance as she had so many times before. What would she advise? To cook with heart, to let the ingredients speak, to create harmony on the plate. Lin opened her eyes and began to select her ingredients with purposeful calm. She would make 3 dishes that told her story: where she came from, where she had been, and where she hoped to go. Back at her assigned station, she organized her workspace with the same methodical precision she had applied to her office desk for years. The kitchen staff, initially skeptical of this outsider, began to take note of her movements. The way she handled her knife with easy confidence, how she tasted and adjusted with a discerning palate, her economy of motion that wasted neither time nor ingredients. For her first dish, Lin prepared a traditional appetizer from her grandmother's repertoire, using techniques she had mastered as a child, but elevating it with the superior ingredients available to her. For the second, she created a fusion dish that represented her life in America, blending her heritage with local influences. The third was entirely her own creation, a dessert that pushed boundaries while respecting tradition. As she cooked, the kitchen's energy shifted around her. The other chefs, busy with their own preparations, nonetheless found reasons to pass by her station, to observe her techniques, to exchange knowing glances that acknowledged skill when they saw it. Chef Wang moved throughout the kitchen, overseeing all, but returning frequently to watch Lin's progress. He said little, his face giving away nothing, but his attention was a form of recognition in itself. When her time was up, Lin presented her 3 dishes to Chef Wang and his 2 sous chefs in a small room adjacent to the kitchen. She explained each creation, its inspiration and technique with quiet confidence. Then she stepped back, her part done, and waited. The 3 chefs tasted in silence, making notes, their faces professional masks. Lin stood with her hands clasped, behind her back, just as she had done when presenting reports to the attorneys at the firm, her exterior calm belying her racing heart. Finally, Chef Wang set down his fork and looked at her. "Lin, what you've created today shows not just technical skill but a deep understanding of flavor and balance. Your first dish honors tradition perfectly. Your second shows creativity and cultural fluidity. Your third—" He paused, glancing at his colleagues, who nodded in agreement. "Your third is something I haven't tasted before. It's truly original." He stood and extended his hand. "We would like to offer you a position in our kitchen, starting as a line cook. The hours are long, the work is hard, and the pay is less than you're probably making now. But if you accept, I promise you will learn and grow more in 1 year here than in 10 years anywhere else." Lin took his hand, her grip firm. "I accept." That evening, Lin invited Priya, Auntie Mai, and David from the competition to a small celebration dinner at Auntie Mai's restaurant. Over dishes prepared by the older woman's skilled hands, Lin shared the news of her career change. "To new beginnings," David toasted, raising his glass. "And to the courage to follow your heart." "To your grandmother," Auntie Mai added softly, "who sees you and is proud." Lin's first day at Azure arrived both too quickly and not quickly enough. She reported for duty at 2 p.m., her new knife roll, ACE, gift from her former colleagues at Harrison & Partners, tucked under her arm. The kitchen was already humming with activity as the staff prepared for dinner service. Chef Wang introduced her to the team, most of whom had heard about the competition winner joining their ranks. Some welcomed her warmly, others were more reserved, waiting to see if she could handle the pressure of a professional kitchen. Lynn was assigned to the guard manger station, responsible for cold appetizers and salads. It was an entry-level position, but she approached it with the same dedication she had brought to her administrative work. Each plate that left her station was as perfect as she could make it, each element precisely placed, each flavor balanced. The dinner service was intense, orders flooding in, Chef Wong calling them out in a steady rhythm, the kitchen responding like a well-rehearsed orchestra. The heat, the pace, the pressure, it was unlike anything Lynn had experienced in her quiet office job. Yet somehow it felt right, as if she had found her proper place in the world. There were moments of stress, of course. A sauce that broke and had to be remade in seconds. A server who dropped a completed dish just before it reached the dining room. The critical eyes of Chef Wong missing nothing, accepting only excellence. But there were moments of triumph, too. A perfect plate that earned a nod of approval from the sous chef. A special request from a diner that Lynn handled with creative flair. The synchronized dance of the kitchen team as they moved around each other in the confined space. A ballet of organized chaos. By the end of the night, Lynn was exhausted but exhilarated. Her feet ached, her back was sore, and a small burn on her wrist stung beneath a hasty bandage. Yet as she helped with the final cleanup, wiping down her station until it gleamed, she felt a satisfaction deeper than any she had known before. As the staff filtered out, Chef Wong stopped her. "How did it feel?" he asked. Lynn considered the question. "Like coming home," she said simply. He nodded, understanding. "It gets harder before it gets easier. There will be days when you question everything, when your body and mind scream for rest. But if you persist, if you continue to cook with the heart I saw in the competition and today, you will find your place here." "Thank you for giving me this chance," Lynn said. "No," Chef Wong replied. "Thank you for taking it. Talent like yours deserves to be shared with the world." 6 months later, Lynn stood at her station in Azure's kitchen, now responsible for hot appetizers, a promotion earned through relentless dedication and undeniable skill. The work was still challenging, the hours still long, but her confidence grew with each service. Word had spread about the lawyer's assistant-turned-chef phenomenon, and occasionally diners requested to meet her, curious about the woman behind the viral competition video that had now been viewed over 1 million times. On this particular evening, Lynn was surprised when Chef Wong approached her during a brief lull in service. "Table 7 has requested to meet the chef who prepared their appetizers," he said. "They were particularly impressed with your lemongrass-infused crab cakes." Lynn wiped her hands on her apron and followed him into the dining room, still somewhat uncomfortable with this aspect of chef life. At table 7 sat her former colleagues from Harrison and Partners, including Jordan and Gloria, all beaming at her approach. "We came to see if the rumors were true," Jordan said, standing to greet her, "that our Lynn has become a star chef." "Hardly a star," Lynn laughed. "Just a line cook learning something new every day." "The food is amazing," Gloria said warmly. "We're so proud of you." As Lynn chatted with her former colleagues, she realized how much she had changed in 6 months. The quiet, nearly invisible woman who had blended into the office background was gone. In her place stood someone more confident, more willing to be seen and heard, someone who had embraced her true self. Later that night, as she finally headed home, Lynn stopped to look up at the stars barely visible through the city lights. She thought of her grandmother, of the small village kitchen where her journey had begun, of the winding path that had led her here. "Thank you," she whispered to the night sky. The journey ahead would not be easy. There would be burns and cuts, failures and setbacks, the grueling climb up the kitchen hierarchy. But Lynn faced it now with the certainty that she was exactly where she should be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. What had begun as a joke had become her truth, and in that transformation lay the real victory, sweeter than any competition could offer. He explained the tryout. She would prepare 3 dishes of her choice, using the ingredients available in their walk-in refrigerator and pantry. She would have 2 hours working alongside the regular staff as they prepared for dinner service. The challenge was intimidating, but clear. Lynn tied on the apron Chef Wong provided, pulled her hair back into a neat bun, and followed him to the walk-in. Inside, she found an abundance of top-quality ingredients: pristine vegetables, fresh seafood, premium meats, and exotic imports that would have been impossible to find in regular markets. For a moment, she felt overwhelmed by the choices, by the pressure to impress. Then she closed her eyes briefly and imagined her grandmother beside her, offering guidance as she had so many times before. What would she advise? To cook with heart, to let the ingredients speak, to create harmony on the plate. Lynn opened her eyes and began to select her ingredients with purposeful calm. She would make 3 dishes that told her story.